Hello and welcome, I'm Carl, and today on Carl Makes Things, our project is going to be painting up this Idoneth Deepkin Thrall. This is a project I'm doing for my sister. She's been thinking about repainting her Deepkin army, and she asked me for a little bit of help to kind of conceptualize a new paint scheme. So I kind of sat down and I started looking around the internet for reference, and I came up with this really sick piece of Naga reference from World of Warcraft. This image here, and I've kind of tried to base a paint scheme off this. So deep blues, golds, and kind of lighter blues. And in order to kind of work out those colors, because I only have one miniature that I borrowed from her and I paint stripped this with a simple green. In order to do that, I've gone to my good old test knolls. This one's a knoll and this one's actually a bugbear, but they're my Reaper's Bones test miniatures. And what I've done is I've kind of worked out the colors that I'm going to be using. If there's one tip that I can give you guys when you're working through paint schemes or trying to come up with ideas and trying to figure out techniques, it's use proxy miniatures like these guys. Use things that you can essentially reprime over and not have to worry about paint stripping, and just kind of jam out color on really quickly. Because by doing this, you end up with like making a scheme like this. I think I tried painting this blue skin tone like 4 or 5 different times in 4 or 5 different ways until I landed on this way. The hard part though with these is remembering actually how the colors all went down. The gold and the blue I remember, and this too, but the red I'm a little spotty on. So, if you are working on this, when you find out something you really like, maybe write the way that you did it down or make a video about it. That also works too. All right, so to get started, I'm going to work on this guy's tabard / skirt area here, and I'm going to be putting down a 50-50 mix of flat red and basalt gray in that area. And I should put down a nice kind of desaturated red there that I can then punch up with more flat red later. So let's get started on that. A little bit of red, a little bit of gray, a little bit of water. I'm gonna mix these together. And as we can see, as I mix them, it becomes almost like a maroon. So when I come back over here with the flat red as a highlight color, it's really gonna pop. I'm also gonna be washing this down a bit to give it a little bit more body. So let's get putting this down. So the next color I'm going to put down is the skin tone, and for that I'm going to use a little bit of basalt gray and a little bit of Dark Prussian blue from Vallejo Model Color line. So let's get this mixed up. So I just got a drop of water here, and I'm going to mix these guys together. Note that I'm using the back of my brush when I do this, so I don't mess the bristles up. For these sable Kolinsky brushes, I baby them quite heavily, so you're almost never going to see me mixing with the tip. Alright, so that's the base coat for the skin and the tabard down. The next step I'm going to do is add a little bit of Agrax Earthsahde. This is Games Workshop, a wash style product. I'm going to add it to this cloak just to darken down some of these folds and recesses and pull out some detail before I go back over it with a little bit of flat red and sponge blend on back some color. So let's get started with that. So any areas like this spot here where I'm getting a little bit of pooling, I'm going to come in with a wet brush, and before it dries with this kind of shade, I'm just going to pull that up so it doesn't build up too much. So I don't have to go and repair any of this with my actual base coat color. Okie doke, so the shade here has fully dried, and I'm just going to come in with a little bit of flat red now, just pure flat red with a little bit of water, and start sponge blending in some of that intensity back onto this cloak. So I'm going to mix this up and we're going to get started. Alright, so I've used my sponge to blend on my coat of flat red for his little tabard area, and I think it's looking pretty good. The next step I'm going to do is painting in the base coat color for his legs, or his kind of like leather greaves. And I'm going for kind of a 1960s era Batman deal with some black and some Dark Prussian blue. It's going to be 2-part Dark Prussian blue to 1 part black. And that is going to get me a really nice dark blue, almost purple, that I'm going to go and layer on pure Dark Prussian blue to later. So let's give that a crack real quick and give it a mix. Just to make my life a little easier and a little harder at the same time, I've decided to put the Dark Prussian blue as kind of an accent color along this kind of raised edging inside his skirt there. I can't really do all of it though with this large brush. This brush is great for these large areas, this size 4 Rosemary & Co. Kolinsky sable. But it's not good for sneaking into little areas like that because the size of the brush will actually like butt up against the miniature itself. So in order to do the interior of this guy's legs, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. So for areas like this where I've gone a little bit over my edge, I can come back in here and I can just wick up some of that paint with a wet brush, as long as it's still quite moist. Then I can reach back to my wet palette, go grab a little bit of my red, and just tidy up that area. If I really want to get crazy, I can actually come back in here with some of my full red here and get as much of that off as the brush as I can. Work that off. There we go. I can just come in and just touch that into that area. Do a little bit of a simple layering blend. Very, very easy to do. And that fixes up any kind of overspill that I've done. You really won't notice it once the miniature is actually fully painted. All right, so that's our base coat for the legs down, and for the kind of trim around his cloak, I'm going to come back in and sponge blend on some Dark Prussian blue, some pure Dark Prussian blue, to kind of add some more color and kind of shading depth to these pants really quick. And then we're going to go work on the skin. So let's get started with that. Oh, and the paint mix for the Dark Prussian blue is going to basically be the same as the red that I did earlier. So kind of not a watery mix, but not a thick mix either. Looking for something in the middle. Okay, so I put a pure coat of Dark Prussian blue on here, and I've actually noticed that this is a little too dark compared to my test miniature, and upon reflection, I added some white to this Dark Prussian blue to get it to this result. So I think it was a 1-to-1 white mix to Dark Prussian blue. So I'm going to give that a shot and see if I get the same result from this. And if not, I'll just go back over, with my base coat and try again. So we've got a 1-to-1 mix here of Dark Prussian blue and white. Let's see if this gets the result that we want, or if it's too intense. That might be too intense. Let's add a little bit more Dark Prussian blue. So this is going to go to about a 1-to-1 to a 1-to-2 ratio. Or my test miniature up here and see. That looks actually pretty close. So I'm going to go with this and see if this works. If it doesn't, I'll just rebase coat it and give it another shot. Alright, so I think the color that I've mixed up here, the 2-to-1 Prussian blue to white, is the appropriate color for this. But just to tidy up some of these areas that might be a little bit too dark, I'm going to come in with my size 2 brush here and a fairly dry paint. I'm not adding too much water to it. I don't want it to flow into any recesses. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to like delicately grab a few of the raised areas that I feel that should have a little bit more of this bright overtone, and I'm just going to put a little bit of color in there, like this little band of light that should be into his pants right here. Little band of light in here. And I'm not going too crazy with this. I'm just being very delicate because I don't want to go back and repaint any of this red. Alright, so that's the blue highlights done. A little bit of a sponge blending, a little bit of brush highlighting just to kind of touch in all the areas I couldn't get the sponge onto. And I think it's really popping and sizzling. The next thing I'm going to go do is his skin, and the color that I'm going to use to go and do that is electric blue. I'm going to sponge highlight on some of this electric blue on here and see if I can't make this guy really pop. So let's get started with that. While I was working on the skin tones, I noticed that I had a little bit of a sponge blending contamination on this guy's hands. I'm just going to come in there, touch it up with a little bit of my base coat, and then go back to working on the sponge blend for the electric blue on his skin. It's important to note that I'm using a very light loaded sponge. I'm getting most of the paint off by dabbing it, and then I'm coming in and I'm very gently pushing it. I don't want to push a lot of the paint, this electric blue, into like recesses in his muscles. I want the darker skin tone that I've got going on there to be the predominant color in that kind of area. So I'm being very, very gentle with my tapping. Alright, so our skin blend's looking pretty good so far, but I want to put in just another layer of highlighting, and I'm going to do that by adding some white to my electric blue in a 1-to-1 mix. So let's jam that out really quickly. So for this brighter blue mix, I'm working on getting as much of this off my sponge as possible because I need to gradually layer this up. So I'm going to come in here and just very delicately work up just a bit of a highlight on all the raised areas, all the tops of the miniature. I'm going to attack it from that kind of angle, and that should make his flesh pop even more when he's on the tabletop. So as I was painting on the skin tones here and getting them all finished up, and by the way, I think they look kind of fantastic, I noticed that there's a little bit of continuity with this little strap and kind of doodad on his front here and the straps on the back there. And I think I'm going to go back and repaint this area in here, that nice blue-black that we used for the pants, and then the nice highlight color we used for the pants as well, and the kind of strapping, because I think that'll make it look a little bit more poppy and alive. And it'll synergize more with our gold metallics that we'll be using later. So the next stage on this guy is going to be putting all the gold on him. He's got a lot of gold on him actually, and to do that I'm going to mix up a base coat of 50% black and 50% gold, and this is going to be our foundation color, and it's going to keep all of the kind of gray and other bits and bobs of color from kind of showing through, and then we can go back over it with pure gold and it's going to look fantastic. So let's get started with that. Alright, so I've gotten all of the base coat for the gold down. Next thing I'm going to do is mix up the gold to put it on top of that. And our mix for this gold is going to be a fairly thick mix. What we're going to be looking here for is just a little tiny drop of water, not very much, because gold likes to separate when we add too much water, and we want to avoid doing that. Alright, so I finished putting all the gold on this miniature, and I think it's looking pretty good so far, but it needs a little extra something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with just a little bit of Agrax Earthsahde, so by brown wash. I'm going to come in and I'm going to start layering in this stuff into all of the recesses, and that is going to give me some shadow and some shade that's going to make this gold really feel dynamic. It's also going to darken it down a bit and allow me, if I want to, come back later, really kind of push in some highlights on those areas with just the pure gold. So the nice thing at this stage is that if we get any coffee staining or if we go too intense in any of these areas, we can just go right back over it with our gold, and that'll clean up those areas pretty nicely. We don't have to worry so much about mixing the Agrax into areas that it shouldn't be in, because if we do get it in those areas, because it's a wash, we can just quickly with a wet brush pull it right up, and it shouldn't really interfere with any of those spots nicely. So everyone, that is the Agrax Earthsahde all dried on this miniature, and it's looking pretty great. It's added all the definition that we were kind of lacking in the gold. One quick wash really just solved all my problems there. I won't even have to do any edge highlighting, considering how bright these edges are compared to the recesses that have been washed. So I'm going to move on from that onto the blade and the handle, which I'm going to do in Vallejo Model Color Black. The next thing I'm going to do is come in with a little bit of Model Air Steel metallic, and we are going to layer this on in all of the kind of raised areas to give it a more dynamic and bodyful look. So the last step on this miniature is going to be painting this tassel here, and I think I'm going to go with an orange, and I'm going to try a new type of way to paint orange today. I'm going to try putting down a little bit of cork brown as a base coat, and then I'm going to start building up with this Amaranth Red, which is really quite just a medium, nice toned orange. So we're going to give that a shot really quick. Alright, so that's our cork brown done. It's actually quite a nice neutral color. If I wanted to go just put some white edge highlighting on this probably wouldn't look all that bad. But to tie it a bit more in with our color scheme, I'm going to use the Amaranth Red here and just put a few coats on top of it and see how that looks. So to punch up these tassels as a last step, I'm going to use a little Agrax Earthsahde. I'm going to go back to the well here, and I'm just going to touch some on there to kind of bring out the recesses, the kind of little darker areas in here, and see if I can't add a little bit more definition back to this mini. So that's our washes done, and it's knocked down the intensity of that orange down a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here with my size 2 brush, and I'm going to try to edge highlight some details back into this guy here with pure Amaranth Red. So I'm going to come in here, just sketch in, making sure I've got a very light load of paint on there. What this is going to do is it's going to clean up some of the mess and kind of just redefine those raised edges because they've gotten a little bit too dark. Alright, so that's all the brush work done on this miniature, and he's looking pretty fantastic. I'll throw a little turntable in here so we can see what he looks like, but oh my god, in the turntable he's got a base done, and the base I'm going to be doing is this water base. So I'm going to take you through it step by step on how I'm going to get this done on this guy here real quick. So to start off with, I'm going to put a little bit of this Vallejo Earth Texture Desert Sand on the top of this base and just get a nice even coat. So what I've done here is I've taken my mixture here and I've just kind of teased it towards the inner edge of this miniature. And now that it's all teased in, I'm going to come in with my brush here and a bunch of water, and I'm just going to clean up any of the kind of mixture that's gotten and deposited onto the actual miniature itself. This Vallejo earth texture stuff is quite water soluble, so it's not that difficult to actually pull off of this miniature. And it takes quite a bit of time to dry. So this takes about 20 minutes to 30 minutes to dry. So this isn't a process that I have to rush. I can take my time and just work that paint, that texture paint off of this miniature quite delicately. This sand is dry to the touch now. There's a few areas that are a little dark though. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of paint. I don't know exactly what I'm going to bring in. Maybe a little bit of this cork brown. And I'm just going to come in and fill in any of these little areas that I feel a little too dark. A little bit of my cork brown. So I put a layer of kind of thinned down dark Prussian blue on this miniature's base here, mostly because it's going to add more depth once I actually get my water texture down. And what I'm going to use for my water texture is this water texture acrylic Atlantic blue from Vallejo. So this stuff is like just a big old thick gel. As you can see, it's like quite substantially thick. And I'm going to grab just a gob of this stuff, like about so. And I'm just going to start like kind of working it on top of this guy here, like that. So my water effects is more or less fully cured, and I want just a little bit more kind of definition. I want a little bit more of what I've got going on in here, all over the miniature. So I've got a big old another heap and helping of this stuff. And I gotta come in and I'm just gonna start layering on another layer of my water effects. So what I've done for this layer is I've kind of come in and like try to pull up some stiff peaks in this water effect. So I'm kind of letting the suction and the momentum of my brush to kind of whip up these kind of nice little wavy rivulets. Alright, so I've given my water effects overnight to dry, and it's looking pretty good. I like how much detail's in it so far. But I kind of want to unify some of the colors, so I'm going to come in here with a little bit of paint and tidy up this effect here. Let's put like a really thin wash of Dark Prussian blue on this just to see how it looks. This is what this looks like with our first coat of Dark Prussian blue. I think it's unified the color quite nicely. The next thing I'm going to do is mix up some Dark Prussian blue with some electric blue, and I'm going to see if I can't make kind of a two-tone wash effect going on before I dry brush this with the white. So that's looking okay, but I think it could be a little bit better. So I'm going to try dry brushing on some electric blue here to see how that looks. At this point, I'm really experimenting with the look of this kind of effect. So I'm just trying to jam out a few ideas. So I think I've gone a little bit too far with this electric blue. So I'm going to come back in and do another layer of quick Dark Prussian. This is a very wet layer, so it's almost a wash consistency. So it's going to flow into all the lower areas and pool in those spots. All right, yeah, that looks way better in my opinion. So I'm going to do a quick dry brush of a little bit of electric blue, very light dry brush, and see if I can't pull up a little bit more color, a little bit more definition. So to finish off this guy, I'm going to do a dry brush of white to kind of represent white caps. So that is the paint on the base finished. The last thing I need to do is add some gloss varnish to make this feel more liquidy. Before I do that, I want to go and tidy up the edge of this base with some isopropyl alcohol. So I'm going to go jam that out really quick. So you guys are probably wondering where this gray came from. I never used a gray this bright, I believe, in this miniature. Even the default primer was kind of a darker gray. And this gray is actually from the original spray primer that was on this miniature. I stripped this miniature with some simple green to start working on it, but I never bothered scrubbing any of the paint or the primer off the base. The simple green removed the primer off the miniature just fine, but the base itself, I never went over it with a toothbrush. So it actually stayed gray, or at least the rim stayed gray. So I'm gonna have to paint this miniature's rim, which is something I don't always do, but I've done it in the past, and it's a pretty simple process. So we're just gonna go do that. I'm gonna put a nice coat of matte black paint, but I'm gonna do that after I put the gloss on. Alright guys, that is one finished miniature, and I'm super happy with how he turned out. He's looking pretty good. So I'm going to throw the turntables up and go through the whole end of the video spiel. I want to thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and comment. Commenting is probably my favorite thing above the likes and the subscriptions, because it shows that people actually enjoy my videos, and I make these just to simply share like my joy of painting and to help people kind of work up their process and get new ideas. And if you're looking for a place to share your work or just get some feedback on your painting, you can do that in the Carl Makes Things Discord. There's a link in the description. It's a friendly place. Everyone's welcome. I'll see you next time for the next project on Carl Makes Things. And this is Carl signing out.